So hello, good evening, everyone. Um, Thank you for taking time to join this session after a long day. So I'm glad you were able to join. This session will be about the bot composer. It's a fairly new tool which is used to create conversational AI or chatbots, to simply put. Um, it would be interesting to know how many of you have actually created chatbots, or if you're absolutely new to this area, and feel free to put it in the chat. I'm also looking at the chat window, and we can sort of tune the session accordingly. So if I'm assuming that a lot of us are relatively new to this area, so I'm happy to take a step back and start from the ground basics, not assuming that we all know what chatbots are, etc. But if you have, it would also be interesting to know if you've also worked with Bot Composer recently or in the past. So feel free to please share your experiences in the chat window. That said, we can get started with the session. So a little bit about myself. I work as a technical manager with a company called Valorum Reply. I'm based out of Kochi, which is in South India. And some of the focus areas that I work on a daily basis is centered around Azure artificial intelligence. So that includes conversational AI, cognitive services, cognitive search, etc. And you can find me online in the following spots. I'm a little lazy on Twitter, but definitely on LinkedIn if you want to stay connected and chat after the session as well. So with that, let's get started. Thank you, Chintan. So for Chintan and for a lot of folks who are relatively new to this space, let's take a step back and kind of talk through this area and chatbots. Maybe spend 10 minutes or so on that before we deep dive into the technical bit of it. So this is what the agenda of the day is. We cover at a very high level, the history of conversational AI, what Microsoft's offering in this space is before we go into Bot Framework Composer. More than half of the session would be demo driven, and then we finally open it up to Q&A. That said, because we have a good amount of time on hand, feel free to drop your comments or your questions in the chat window as and when you have them. I'll try and answer them, but if I don't see them as well, I'm sure to answer them at the end. So here goes. So this is the story thus far. The evolution of chatbots, or conversational AI as it's otherwise called, follows the same kind of spectrum as the evolution of AI or artificial intelligence itself is. For those of us who are in the technical industry for quite a bit of time, we would have come through the era of PCs or desktops, and then the internet. You use websites and web applications. And then, in the 2000s, you have smartphones, devices where you can download any application from Play Store or Apple Store, and you get your work done. And now, all of a sudden, people are talking about artificial intelligence, or apparently talking about chatbots and conversational AI. So there's a lot of shift in the industry in terms of the nature of the applications and how our industry has actually grown for a couple of reasons, right? So the evolution of chatbots throughout this has actually, it was not a technology that is, really absolutely new, and you'd see how. So before we talk to that, again, I take one more step back and kind of answer this question. What exactly is a chatbot? Because there's a lot of glossy terms that do the rounds in terms of conversational AI and virtual assistants, conversational assistants, and so many different terms here. But at the end of the day, a chatbot is a computer program. It's just another piece of software. The USP is that it helps simulate human conversation. That is perhaps the most or the biggest selling feature of a chatbot. So you can interact with it using text or voice, or maybe even both. So this software that we're talking about, it can be standalone. So you probably can relate to Alexa or Siri or Cortana. You can also have that embedded into any of your existing applications. If you've been to Amazon and you've tried out the Amazon bot on the website, Or if you've used Swiggy, but I really like the Swiggy bot, or if you've ordered from that, if you've missed an order, if you're trying to figure out where the delivery is, the Swiggy bot. So that's another bot that's a part of their application or part of their website. So it could be standalone, it could be a part of an existing application as well, but it's a chatbot. So what can a bot do, or what all is really in a bot? Now, this really depends on you and your use case. You could build a bot for absolutely anything, whatever you deem its purpose to be. You can build a bot to wake you up in the morning, for telling you what the weather is. So that can be very tricky, for setting your dentist appointment or getting a dinner reservation. It can do very, very simple things like answer simple question and answers, to doing very, very sophisticated conversations. So the experiences can be very complex, and you can have very, very complicated bots as well. So it's completely up to you. But perhaps the question that I get asked most importantly is, why chatbots, right? We have websites, we have web applications, we have smartphone applications, we have all sorts of software. Why would someone really use a chatbot? So a couple of reasons. One, and I think that this is probably, again, what really sells a chatbot, is the experience of the interaction. It feels less like, at least it should feel like, less like using a computer and more like dealing with a person. And that makes a lot of difference, doesn't it? I mean, if you think about it, historically, before the computer era and all, the way the humans, you and I, would have interacted, and how our forefathers have really interacted, exchanged ideas and thoughts, was really conversation. We tell stories to each other, and that's how we exchange ideas and thoughts. And then when the computer era came, it was all about bits and zeros and ones, and there's no other way that we can make a machine understand what we wanted to do. And so we put in all efforts to help, club all our creativity come down to zeros and ones. And then our programming languages, and we'd start with DOS, and then it came to graphical user interfaces, GUI, and every stage of that development, even for the technical folks, even for the programmers, it was about trying to use your natural capabilities and your creativity to interact with this machine. Today, for an end user, it is as simple as dealing with another fellow human being. So in my days, if I had to wake up in the morning, I need to wake up for an exam or something, I need to take out my, let's say, my mobile phone or my application. I need to go to my clock, I need to set my alarm, and I need to tell it to, wake me up at this time. What my kid does is, it just says, Alexa, wake me up at 6 a.m. So that's how simple it is. So that is, it might look very trivial. We don't probably give it as much credit as it's due, but it's really a fundamental shift in the whole paradigm. It's like something that we've never dealt before, the ability to interact with a computer the way that we interact with just another human being. So that's a game changer, in fact, and that's probably the biggest selling factor of a chatbot. Club that with the fact that it's available 24/7, 365. It does not take holidays, and it does not ask for races. It's perfectly happy. It does not get bored. It provides immediate responses. It can reach multiple channels, let's say Facebook, Twitter, Slack, wherever you want to put it. And in terms of cost, perhaps the initial investment of creating a chatbot might be there. It's definitely an investment, but over the long run, it would definitely give you the return on that investment as well. So that's a bit in a nutshell about why are we actually creating chatbots, right? So a little on the history, if you care to note, I put this timeline there to sort of show you that Siri or Alexa is perhaps not the first chatbot in the world. We've had the evolution of chatbots right from the 1950s and 60s. You've had different kinds of chatbots and AI researchers who've been working on building these technologies. But what happened in the last 10 years or so is a couple of things. So one, we've had advanced computing power. We've had cloud platforms like Azure, Microsoft's Azure itself. We've got advanced statistical models, improved research algorithms, and we've got a lot of this big data plus computing power plus advanced statistical models come together, and that has really helped researchers come out of this, what's otherwise called an AI winter sort of period. And now we are able to create more of these kinds of applications. So though we did have the interest and the curiosity to start way back in 50s and 60s, it was probably not possible. We didn't have that kind of computing power. We didn't have that kind of data at our disposal. So that's why you get to hear a lot about it these days, but it really is a pretty old technique. And even futuristically, if you kind of think about it, there's a lot of statistics which go on to say that this is a very, it's far beyond the hype, and it's really a very practical scenario. Like one specific statistic I would quote is, it says by 2025, 95% of customer interactions would be through some kind of bot. It could be over telephone or online, but some form of an AI chatbot. So a lot of people, again, getting interested in this area. In fact, a lot of major brands and organizations already jumped the bandwagon on this. Again, this is not an area that's restricted to a small enterprise or a large enterprise, or whichever brand you are, whichever domain you are. It could be retail, travel, healthcare, hospitality, anything, anywhere. You look, every major brand almost already have a conversational AI strategy. They almost already have a chatbot as part of their branding or marketing. That said, there are very innovative use cases also of bots. Some of the peculiar ones that I'd like to call out is there's a bot called Do Not Pay. What started off as a ticketing bot that would help you pay your parking lot fines is now actually developed into a legal services bot. You could use the bot to even sue someone. It's not yet available in India, sorry, it's just in the US or UK, but that's a very interesting use case. Margo is another bot. It's an AI wine chatbot, so it helps you pick the right kind of wine to go with your food. And Wobot is interestingly a bot that is based off cognitive behavioral therapy. So this is a very advanced clinical research area. It's used to heal people with mental depression. So you can imagine the range of use cases that a bot can actually serve. So the reason we're talking about all this is, as you come to the end of the first section, which is just leveling the stage here, is to just debunk some chatbot myths, which I typically get asked, right? So chatbots are a new technology. Now you know for a fact that that's not true. I mean, this technology is relevant. It is developing. It's taking a lot of traction, but it's not necessarily new. Chatbots can only support customer service, and you know now for a fact that that's not true. You've just seen a lot of use cases of chatbots, and very interesting ones as well. All bots use AI, not necessarily. Some bots, you probably would have used this yourself, typically follow a very structured pattern, and it does not know how to answer anything beyond those 2 or 3 commands or 2 or 3 clicks of buttons. Those are not AI chatbots. Those are just very rigid, programmed, structured bots. AI chatbots are a little more open and are able to understand the user's context and is able to serve the user much better. Chatbots versus humans, and this can be a very scandalous topic, but honestly, I want to talk about this in terms of chatbots and humans. Chatbots are not here to replace humans or to take away human jobs like any other AI technology. At least as of now, today in the industry, the kind of developments that we have made, AI chatbots are very narrow domain-specific chatbots. The kind of chatbots that the robots that you see in the movies, the sci-fi movies, and sorry to say this, it's bad news, but that's like maybe years away. So that's artificial general intelligence, and what we're dealing with is artificial narrow intelligence, or ANI. And these kind of chatbots are literally there to just offload, you can offload your human work to that. Even let's talk about the typical customer service scenario, yeah? So typically people ask a lot of the same kind of questions, very, very easy and simple to answer questions, which a human agent would probably be answering during their time. So what the human would do would probably offload at least that first 40% of queries to a chatbot, and they free themselves up of that boring, that mundane work. They go do something far more creative with their time. And of course, I think for every chatbot, as good as a chatbot can be, there's always a human escalation point. the bot cannot answer a question, there's always a handoff feature to a human agent, and that's where the humans come into. So it's actually a team of humans and bots working together. That's how I'd like to think about it. And chatbots are very difficult to build. This is really the myth that we want to break today in this session. So I probably not answer that. I'll leave it to you, and you can answer that for the rest of the session. So that really sets the ground for the background of the chatbots, and I see no questions, so I will proceed. Now, the Microsoft's offering in this space. So the good news is, Microsoft started on this chatbot journey a couple of years back, and Satya prophetically having said in one of his Build conferences that human language is the new UI layer, and bots are like the new application. And that sort of prediction did not go false, because today, as you look at it, all the services, all the AI services of Microsoft are really based off the Azure AI platform, and you'd see that clubbed into a couple of categories, mainly the Azure AI services, Azure infrastructure, and tools. I want to take a moment here to connect the dots to a previous conversation that we just had. Some of the reasons why AI proliferation is happening right now, and the reason why people are jumping onto creating AI applications, chatbots included, is for a couple of reasons. One, we have an advanced infrastructure. So you can see that in terms of the computing power and the data that's provided. Now, in terms of big data, we typically relate that to the availability of big data. But it's not just that, it's also the ability to store and to harness this data, to process this data. And thanks to powerful infrastructure that's provided by cloud platforms like Azure, we have the relevant data and the compute to do that. Club that with the fact that we also have powerful services to that. So this is also one of the reasons why we're able to develop very powerful AI applications. And most of all, for the developer community, we have an advanced set of tools, both for coding and for management, that will be used by us to leverage or to make best use of these AI services and infrastructure. So put this all together, this is really what the AI platform looks like. Now, our focus area, as you can see, is mostly around the conversational AI. So I'm just giving you the very high big picture here before we delve deep in. Now, as we go deep into this, I want to say that conversational AI as is today, at least from Microsoft perspective, there are various ways in which you can build a bot. Specifically, I call out 3 specific ways in which you can build a chatbot today on the Microsoft realm. So the capabilities and the potential of each of these 3 areas really varies. So one, you can use something called a Power Virtual Agent. Now, this is a no-code tool that's meant primarily for business users who are not going to deal with the code. It has a very simple, it's an online application. It's got a very simple, graphical user interface. You can drag, drop, and you can create. This is an absolutely no-code tool. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum, you have the Bot Framework SDK. That's really the backbone of the coders, so the developers who really want to be involved fully in code. They can make use of this open source SDK, and they can use using one of their favorite programming languages. But in the middle, both of this, no code and fully in code, you have a low code tool. And this low code tool brings in the best of the environments, wherein it really helps to speed up the chatbot development. And this tool, Bot Framework Composer, would be what we are discussing for the rest of the session today. So really, each of these have got their own pros and cons. Each one of them have got their strengths. The Power Virtual Agent really helps you if you have no coding skills, but you want to build very easy and quick and very simple chatbots. You can try out Power Virtual Agents. If you want to visualize your dialogues and you want to see these dialogues in action, Bot Framework Composer or Bot Composer is a great tool for you, and that's low code. But if you want full flexibility and control, and you want to completely be in control of what you're building, and you are a developer who's got the technical skills, Bot Framework SDK might be a code first approach that you want to explore. Now, a little bit of the story as well here. Initially, when Microsoft started, they came out with, you probably know this yourself, they came out with the bot framework SDK first. And that was, as you know by now, it's a pure code first approach. At some point, again, based on the feedback from the developer community, also realized that what really we need is an ability to visualize these dialogues. For seasoned developers who worked on Visual Studio and VS Code, I don't know how much of us really use that, but there is a possibility to, there is a designer canvas as part of that tool. You can really see the UI that you're building, sort of like that. That capability was not there out of the box when Bot Framework SDK was made. So that was the missing piece. And luckily, they came back with Bot Framework Composer, which is a fantastic tool to really see what you're building. And it really does not require a lot of development skills and a lot of technical capabilities to do that. And then Power Virtual Agents was just another tool or another offering to, aligned with the principle of democratizing AI services, where AI applications are not just meant to be built by developers or engineers. Even citizen developers should be able to build AI applications, right? So that's where Power Virtual Agent fills the picture. Okay, so moving on. All right, so this is the, I hope you can see my screen and it's visible.
Yes, Jen.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Kasam. So moving on, so now we're going to get into discussing more of the Bot Framework Composer and what that tool is all about. So this is what the Bot Framework, so what is really the Bot Framework Composer? Right? We've been talking about that for a bit. The Composer is a visual editing canvas for building bots. It's as simple as that. It's open source, it's IDE, you want to imagine that as similar to Visual Studio or any other IDE that you've used previously, but it's really a visual editing canvas which helps you build bots. And we'll see that in action in a while. What can I do in the Composer? You can create and manage bots. Simply put, the most simplest way of putting that, but that's a little too oversimplified. In fact, there's a ton of features that you can use in the Composer. You can create bots. You can add all sorts of capabilities to a bot within the Composer. You can configure the responses, how you want the bot to respond. You can integrate it with APIs. You can add FAQ capabilities, add natural language understanding capabilities. You can download the source code from your bot, from your Composer. You can publish the bot to Azure. You can do a score of things inside Composer, and we'll see how as well. Now, why should I use the Composer? This is a fair question to ask. It is so much easier for us to build a bot if we can see what we are building, right? So it's easier to design the conversational experiences in a visual designer. Even if you are a seasoned developer, even if you are working on a chatbot today, using the code first approach, using the Bot Framework SDK, I encourage you to try out the Bot Framework Composer. You can start from that. You can even take a look at your bot using the Composer tool, and you can see how the bot is really shaping up. And this really helps multidisciplinary teams, which means that if you have a person on your team that's not so savvy with code and is not a head-first code developer, but is a very good business analyst and who knows the business case really well, the person can use the Composer to really visualize or to design your conversational experience. And this is because it is really a low-code tool. You do not need to know C# or Node.js to really code your way around the Composer. And how do I get the Composer? So that's pretty easy. You can just download the Composer online. It's available as a desktop application. You can even use a web component if you would like to. But I've used the desktop application, which we will use in the demo. So before we dive right into the demo, a couple of concepts that we might want to know. One is the concept of dialogues, right? What is a dialogue? So if you want to compare that literally to what we use, every conversation that we have can be really broken up into dialogues. So it's a combination of dialogues that make up a conversation. That's exactly the meaning here as well. So dialogues are really building blocks of the bot functionality. So each block, each dialogue is actually a part of a bot functionality or contains a portion of a bot functionality. Now, what are triggers and actions? Because we would be adding triggers and actions as part of we created. So at a very high level, triggers are what are the rules and actions are what steps that we take. Let me put that very, very simply. If I say something to a bot, that's when an event is happening. A trigger is that event handler. So the bot needs to know that I have told something to the bot, and that really triggers the bot, literally. Once something has triggered the bot, once what I have said has triggered the bot also needs to know what to do about it, what action to do. Say, for example, I tell the bot, good morning. That has really triggered the bot to respond. So that's an event handler, that's a trigger. Now, what does the bot do when I say a good morning is probably the action of the bot. So the two concepts there in terms of triggers and actions. Okay, so I take a pause on the theory and I will dive right into the bot framework composer. We go around the tool and we'll see how that looks like. Okay, so I'm assuming you can see my composer tool. This, as I said, I've downloaded from the web from Microsoft, and you can install this on your machine as a desktop application, and you get that up and running. And this is what the bot composer looks like. No problem, Aman. Thank you. And so let me show you around the tool first. So this is a fairly simple tool. The first thing that really strikes you is by clicking the plus create new button. And once you click that, you get this dialog up, and you would immediately note that you have two flavors here to choose. One is C# and one under Node, which is in the preview phase. Now, the composer is really hiding, or hiding, I must say, it's the best word to use, all the wiring for the developer that is using the composer. Behind the scenes, there's really code that is being used, and that code that is being generated, you can see towards the end, can actually be downloaded from the composer, and you can continue to work continue to work in integrating very powerful features with your bot. But as long as you work in the composer, you'll probably not see any bit of C# or Node preview, to be honest. But to know that, once you start with a bot, your choice of C# or Node preview will actually decide what code is ultimately going to be downloaded. So it's important that you make that choice up front. So I'll go with C#. And again, there are a lot of templates that are available here. As you can see, there's something as simple as an empty bot. Let's consider that as simple as a hello world bot. And you have so many other flavors. If you want to read through, each of these flavors would have a documentation literature on the right-hand side, which will tell you what you get out of the box from using these templates. It can be as sophisticated as building enterprise bots. So this is a template that will help you build an enterprise bot rather quickly, and you'd see some of the capabilities and the Azure resources it's using, etc. For now, let's start with the empty bot, and what I expect to see is a greeting for new and for returning users, and supported language English, and it's as per its recommendation, it's good to start for first-time bot developers. So let's get started with that, and I would give it a name for and lack of creativity on a Thursday evening. I would probably name it my Thursday bot. And I see the location that it's going to be downloaded to as well. I can choose it to be an Azure Function app or Azure Web App. I will use Azure Web App for now. And I hit create. And I must tell you, this might take a couple of minutes or so, But meanwhile, I also wanted to introduce you to another tool. When you interact with a bot, what we really want is also a tool to simulate that kind of conversation. I should be able to send some message, the bot should be able to respond back, and so on and so forth. So a perfect tool for that is also available from Microsoft. It's called the Bot Framework Emulator. And how you get that is you just go to Google and just type download Bot Framework Emulator, and that's it. Just browse for Bot Framework Emulator and you go to the GitHub releases and you can download this emulator from here. I have downloaded the emulator, so I'll show you that in a while. It's a tool where you can mimic the or emulate the conversational experiences between you and the bot. So while now here, as you see, the composer is actually doing its part in getting all the packages and all ready for us to get the bot up and running. So once the bot is ready, what we are expecting to see is really a bare bones bot with nothing much. It's an empty bot that we have chosen. You see a few recommendations here, which will just help you to get started. You can dismiss that. You want to see that back at any point, use the rocket menu, and you're there. So this is what the menu looks like. On the top bar, you have the provision to start a bot, and we'll do that in a while. On the left, you see some side menus, the last of which is a settings panel where you can change the very look and feel of this composer itself and also configure your updates, and I've set it to auto update. For anyone who's worked on a previous version of the composer itself, this year they released the composer 2.0, which is a fairly powerful version. Probably the experience itself has changed quite a bit. So I encourage you to try out the 2+ composer version. So from the home menu, so what we created is our Thursday bot, and this is what the Thursday bot looks like. So here on the left hand side, I see some of what's available out of the box, and this is really the dialogue that we're talking about. It's created a default dialogue for us. It's called the Thursday bot, and you can see these little lightning symboled things here, and these are really our triggers. You can add new triggers or custom triggers as well, and we do all of it. We're going to try all of that, right? So the rest of the session is going to be just in the composer. And the central portion here, you see our visual editing canvas that we're talking about, and we're going to really draw out our bot, sort of diagram our bot in the central piece here. And on the right hand side, this is the property pane. So that really talks to the anatomy of the tool, but without doing anything really, I'm just going to start running the bot. Let's see what we get out of the box. Once the bot is up and running, there are really two options for you to test the bot. So you can test the bot in two ways. You can either test it in emulator, which we spoke about recently, and so this will trigger the bot framework emulator. That was the tool we downloaded, and you can really interact with the bot here. Like, as you can see, the bot has greeted me, welcome to your bot. And I can say things back, and for now it will not understand anything that I say because I have not configured or I have not really trained it to understand that. But the framework emulator is really powerful because for each and every message you can actually see the JSON payload. You can see the entire stack trace. This is really, really helpful in understanding the flow of the conversation. But if you do not want to leave the composer and you want to stay within the composer and just want to play around with the bot inside here, you still have an option called open in web chat. This is probably the simplest thing you can do. So you don't have to even shift to emulator, though you have both the options. Here you see the same experience. So it says welcome to your bot, and unfortunately it doesn't understand anything else that I say, but that's what we're going to do right now. Okay, so let's see. Now, it did say welcome to your bot. Let's see where that came from. If you look at the left pane, you have a greeting trigger here. And this might seem a little overwhelming, but trust me, it's quite simple. The logic here is, so this is the diagram that they have drawn out, and we can create flowcharts like this, and it's fairly simple, and we're going to create one soon. What this logic talks to is to only greet new and returning users. In fact, if you can see, the exact welcome message is available here. And tell you what, we can really change this message as well. So you say, hey there, and I'm going to say good to see you. There you go. And if I run the bot, I'm going to see that message instead of that. So it's as simple as that. But let's say even just after greeting the user, I want to try doing something else. So if you can see, I can actually zoom this so you can see this better. And there you go. And I can click the plus button here. And you see that there are a couple of options here, a couple of options for us to try out. You can send a response. That is a plain response that is going to be sent to the user. You can ask a question and expect a text or a number or a confirmation. You can create conditions, branch if else conditions, like the one that you saw just above. You can create loops, for loops and continue loops. You can have dialogue management. You can even build new dialogues and call those dialogues from here. You can manage properties. You can access external resources, integration with external systems, and you have a couple of debugging options. Let's try something really simple for now. So let's ask a question, and which will expect a text response. So the minute I click that, you might observe that there are actually two boxes that appeared. In the top box, I'm going to prompt for a user. So I'm going to say, my name is, say, Thursday, but which is a really lame name. So let's say global AI bot. And I'm going to ask, what's yours? Cool. And I'm hoping the user is going to give me a response to that in the user column. Now, in the user input text, this is the box where I'm expecting the user to come, user input to come. I'd like for it to be stored in some kind of a property. So let's say user dot input. So I'm just taking the response from the user. I'm just going to put it in a property. So at the end of this little exercise here, I'm going to ask the bot, as the bot is going to ask the user, prompt the user for their name, and they're going to enter their name, hopefully. And I'm just going to greet them with whatever name that they entered. So I'm going to send a response, and I'm going to say, hey. And I know I stored it inside user.input, but I don't want to remember all that logic. So here I go, I hit click X. I have there are a couple of options here. I choose user.input, and you see that piece of code that got auto-generated for you. You can absolutely type this out if you have the pension to, but you can even select it. So this is the low-code tool that we are talking about. Let's just run and just see what we have thus far. We're trying to create a greeting bot that is going to greet us with our specific name. So here you have a button called Restart Conversation ID, and let's restart. So it says, hey there, good to see you. We changed the welcome message. My name is Global AI Bot. What's yours? Let's say Liji. It says, hey Liji. That's it. Pretty quick for having created that much of work, right? I mean, without writing any C# or any other programming language. So that's as simple as how you can create responses. Likewise, you can create a lot of different ways. One of the things that we do with chatbots in general is no matter what domain your bot belongs to, no matter what your business case will be, you typically always have a help intent for a bot. You can always expect your user to type in help. Help is a very default command that a bot is expected to answer no matter where you're coming from. Right? So let's say I want to add a help intent. So how I would do that is I would go ahead and add new trigger. But before that, I want to show you another thing. This is the dialogue that we're dealing with the Thursday bot here. And I want to say that there is a property for language understanding. And you might notice that there's a recognizer type. I'm just looping or hovering over the question mark there to show you what that really means. To understand what the user says, your dialogue needs a recognizer. And this includes sample words and sentences that the users might use. So there are various ways in which your bot or your dialogue will understand, will recognize what your user is trying to say. And that is a very key aspect for the bot, because as long as the bot understands, the bot will be able to respond. If the bot does not understand what the user is going to ask it, it will fail in able to respond to that. So there are a couple of options for recognizers, and some of the options that we have is we have a default recognizer, which is associated with a more powerful service called language understanding service. We'll probably look at that a little later. For now, let's choose a regular expression recognizer. So what that means is, when I go here and I add a new trigger, I'm going to add a new trigger for help. So this is what we wanted to add. And I'm expecting the user to say something of the sort of help. Maybe just type in help. The user could also, say this in different ways. So that's the beauty of human language, right? I mean, there are various ways in which we express our need. So I can say help. Someone else could say, I need help, or something as simple as I am lost. You could even say that. You might want to note that I can configure these various phrases or various utterances. I just need to separate them by using this pipeline symbol. It's not a comma really, it's a pipeline symbol, and I hit submit. So that's how I've created the intent trigger. If you want, you can change these here, you can edit it at a later point as well. So what really happens is when the user types help, or I need help, or I am lost, this trigger is going to be fired. If you remember from our PowerPoint, the next thing what we need to do is configure an action, and you can choose any action to deal with that trigger. I might just want to send a response saying, I am global AI bot, and I can help you with So we can fill that up later. So this is what I expect the user to see when the user types any of these trigger phrases, that this trigger will be fired and this action will be taken into account. Let's see that work. Okay, and you just give that a minute, and I maybe put in a tidbit here. When I started with the Composer, one of the things that I kept looking all over the place for was for a save button. Fortunately or unfortunately, there is no save button in the Composer. It's all auto-saved, so you can save yourself of that trouble. There's no save button. So here we go again. So what is yours? It says Liji, and it says, hey Liji. Now if I say help, let's see. So it says, I'm global AI bot. Oh, I made a typo there. I can help you with right? Sounds fairly simple. Let's try another one. So here's the thing, again, with chatbot developers. We expect the users to respond in a certain way, but from my experience, I will tell you, users are very good at throwing curveballs at you, and they will shape your conversational journey in ways that you would probably not imagine. For example, you're expecting the user to enter a name at this point. Most users would not. Now, I'm not interested in telling you what my name is. In fact, I really want some help. I would really love help. And this is probably not the best experience for the user. What I really want it to do is respect an interruption to this prompt here. It should be able to understand that I'm asking it for a valid question, should be able to interrupt that, and probably later on it can ask me that same thing again, but please don't do this to me. Again, that is fairly simple to do if you are doing this within the Composer, and I'll show you how. You go back to the greeting, and here's where I did my prompt, right? And there are a lot of properties on the right pane that you can explore. There are validations, recognizers, etc. A very simple one that I want to show you right here is under prompt configurations. You turn allow interruptions to true, and it's as simple as that. So this is very simple, nitty-gritty details, but that really goes a long way into what would eventually make or break your conversational experience. So let's try this. What's yours? And I don't want to tell it what my name is. I'm going to say help. And it actually responds with the help. Whatever response that I had configured for the help, it says, I'm global AI bot, I can help you with But it does remember that we were in the midst of another conversation, and just like a human, it would be like, but we were talking about this, so what about that? So the cancel dialog is something that you can try out on your own, but I just wanted to show you that mechanism of interruption. Okay, cool. So we have some more time left. I'd love to show you another, build a little more sophistication into this as much as we've covered on the ground level. Now, I was working on a bot recently, on a challenge recently. It's more for a little hackathon that we are running. And if you are familiar with, how do I put this? With the UNSDGs, it's a club of like 17 goals. For United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I was particularly interested in the climate action and sustainable city goals. There are a lot of these that you might want to try out and be interested in. So I was really interested in, going back to our offices, going back to schools, and the world is finally opening up, thank God, after the pandemic slowly. And again, we go back to the same issues that we had prior to the pandemic. Pollution and air quality index, etc. So I was curious about creating a bot which really told me what the air quality index is in my city or any city. Luckily, I chanced upon a public API that was available from AQI, that's airqualityindex.org, and any city that you type in here, it will give you the air quality index for that city. So what I did is I created an account and I tried out the APIs, and I can actually show you the APIs. You can just give me a minute. And power up my Postman, and I can really show you my API there. So this is the API that was called, and if you I tried out the API in Postman, and it works perfectly fine. There's a bit of code that I need to write if I were to follow a traditional, code first approach to get this working. But I was curious on how easy it would to be doing this in a compose. Let's try it together. So I'm going to create a new trigger here. And I'm going to put this AQI trigger. AQI stands for air quality index. Let's keep it simple. I'm expecting the user to say something as simple as detect AQI. There you go. And what I really want to do is just call that API. Right? So if you click the action for that, you can access external resources, and you will note that there is an option to send an HTTP request. Let's do that. And on the right side, on the properties pane, I'm going to start configuring this. So that would be a get. And if I can just copy this entire URL and put it here. And I would also, so that's where I'm sending my HTTP response. I also want the result to be stored in a result object. So that would be API.response. So that's about it. I'm calling my HTTP request, and after this, I'm expecting my result property to be populated. I want to show the result to the user as well, and I would send a response. But really, before sending a response, typically what would we do in a coding environment? We would check for the status code, right? So let's create a condition. We would create a branch if-else condition, and I would check if I'm going to write an expression here. I'm going to check if dialog.api response dot status code equal to 100. That's really what we would write otherwise as well. So that said, okay, so if that is true, I want to send it a response. I want to send a response saying what the results of the API is. So again, I don't want to remember all of this. I would go to dialog.api response, and I'll just check this in my API response object. So where the air quality index is inside my JSON content, inside data, inside AQI. So let's do that. We come back here, dot content, dot data, dot AQI. That's where my air quality index would be. Let's say that this is the air quality index for that city. And if it's false, I would just send a response saying that request failed. Probably not the best way to say that, but the idea for now. There you go. Okay, and we're going to say that. And That's quite pretty much it. Let's see what we have for now. So we've called an HTTP a request. We are expected to get a status code as a response, and let's restart that. Let's see if we detect AQI, and oh, there it still says AQI 53. Now, if you've actually noted, we did configure for the interruptions, which is why even when it was asking me for the name, I didn't bother to say that. I went ahead and called detect AQI, and it said AQI 53. So that is the air quality index. Now, again, there's a bit of hard coding there because I tried that with my city. I would love for you to try it with your city. So what I would do is ask a question here, ask a prompt. I would ask it a question, enter your city. And then based on your city, so this would be, I would get the city name, which would be user.city. And instead of hard coding my city, I would go ahead and put the user.city there. And let's try it again. So we are prompting the user to enter their city name, and then once we get the city name, using that city name, we're going to send it to the bot. You know what, I would just remove this interruptions and this thing for now, because it's actually taking our focus off the business case really. So let's remove this for now, and we are really going to focus only on the air quality index. So we are going to prompt the user for the city name, and once the user provides us a city name, we pass that to the HTTP response, HTTP request, and we get a response. So that really is the story thus far. So we're going to restart, and let's say detect AQI. Enter your city. Let's say Cochin. It says AQ53. Okay. Now I want to try this again. Detect AQI, and it says AQI 53. Cool. So here's the thing. It did not prompt me for my city name once again, and that's because the property of city name is already stored. Consider that as some sort of a static variable. It's already got that city name. So another little trick here is we need to sort of ask it to re-prompt it or prompt it every other time. How you would do that is go to the prompt again, go to others, prompt configuration, and there is a value to always prompt true. Simple little nuggets and which would all need to be taken care of as you code in your programming language. But as long as we are working within the composer, this is really small switches that we need to turn on here and there, and we're actually good with it. So let me do this detect AQ, and I'm going to copy this. It's going to take a while here. Enter your city, and I'll do Kochi and AQI 53. If I try that again, it says enter your city. Let's try Chennai. Do you have any city you particularly want to try for? Let me know in the chat and we can try that. Detect AQI. Let's try Mumbai and AQI 124. Now what we do with the AQI is a different conversation, but you get the idea. So you can probably see how easy it was to really call an HTTP request, get a response, parse it, display it to the user, and be done with it. And really, I did not write C# code to do that. So this is really the power of the bot composer, the kind of conversational experiences that you can create, and you can imagine that anyone with low code skills will be able to create such bots very easily. I'd also want to just show you one bit here. If you go back to the dialog and you can click the edit please here. Let me see. Probably later. Okay, I will come back to that. And so for the sake of time, I can go back to my PowerPoint and start with that. Okay, so we are really just scratching the surface in terms of what the capabilities of the composer are. And the composer, as we know, is capable of much, much more powerful things. Before we talk to that, I want to really use this opportunity to discuss at a very high level of what really is working in a conversational experience. I mean, we've all interacted with a chatbot at some point in time, right? The way we see it from a user's perspective, from an audience perspective, is you sending a question, you get a response. It's as simple as that. But really, a chatbot is only the face of AI. Behind the chatbot, there is so much that is working. It's really a brain that's working behind the chatbot to bring you the services that look so simple on screen, but now you know how much complicated it is. In fact, it's far more complicated, because when you send the users a question, when the user sends the bot a question and the bot obtains that question, there are a couple of things in play here. First, the bot needs to understand what the user's ask is. Once that clarity is obtained, the bot should know what to respond with as well. So if the bot has understood the user's ask, there are a lot of natural language understanding, NLU components or services that will help us with that. One of the services available from Microsoft is called Language Understanding Service. It's an Azure Cognitive Service. It's a set of APIs that a developer can call, can invoke, and you can consume those services. So to understand what the user's intent was or the user's ask was, you need not write APIs from scratch. You can simply invoke cognitive services like Luis, and which will help you do that. Similarly, once you have understood what the intent of the user is, to be able to answer that user's question or user's query, you need not create an SQL DB or any other sort of structured or NoSQL DB. You can create a knowledge repository of your own, which even non-technical folks will be able to maintain and manage. And one such cognitive service from Microsoft is called Q&A Maker. You can try all this out. They've got their own portals called Luis.ai, QAMaker.ai. These are all websites that portals that you can go and you can try out these cognitive services. So similar to these, there are a variety of cognitive services that are available from Microsoft. If you want to do proofreading, you can call the Bing spell check APIs. You can provide voice support. You can translate your responses. You can analyze the sentiment of the user queries. You can do a lot of these using what we call pre-built AI services or Azure Cognitive Services. The reason why we're discussing this is, traditionally we would use these, we would configure these AI services, and we would use a code-first approach to integrate these into our applications when we work with the Bot Framework SDK. But it is as easy to do this with the Bot Framework Composer as well. You can easily integrate your composer with a Q&A maker or with a Luis, and you can even publish it to Azure, and you can get this done. So for the sake of time and the brevity that we have today, I'd probably show you a bot that I built. It's somewhere along the same bot that we were building right now, but to just show you how that Q&A was configured, right? So Q&A is really question and answer. That's what Q&A stands for. And how I would do that is on the left pane, you would note that there's a tooltip called Knowledge Base. You click that pane, and if you note here, there are a lot of question and answer pairs that I have created. Now, you might think that I added all of these manually, which is perfectly possible. If you click here on this button here, you can add question and answer pairs manually, perfectly possible. But the beauty of the fact is that you can even import Q&A pairs into this. For example, one of the things that I was toying around with this is, it's a great thing that we're able to detect AQI, but users might want to really kind of understand what is air quality index. What does that number 50 mean? What does the number 100 mean? What is pollution? I mean, there's so many questions in users' minds. And while I was looking around for that, one of the things that I noted is I came across this site called AQI air quality index.in, which has a fabulous FAQ page already. So this is an entirely different site, and it's got this great FAQ page. And I did not want to manually add all of these FAQs. I mean, it's got all the question answers that I was looking for, but I really don't have the bandwidth to add these manually. Instead, what I did, I just copied the URL of this website, went back into my Composer, and here in my knowledge base, I have an option to add a Q&A maker knowledge base. I could name it whatever, FAQ1, because I already have an FAQ page. I would set it. I'm just showing you how those question answers populated. I would just give the source URL here. My language is US. I'm creating a new knowledge base from URL, and I click next. And that might take a couple of minutes, but at the end, this is what you get to see, right? So cool. Let me just run that for you and show you what kind of experience we see. So this is how simply we can, or how easily we can configure a bot within Composer to a Q&A maker. And really, we don't have to take care of any of the understanding of the intents or anything here. It's all built into the Composer, which is why it's fairly simple for the Composer to answer these questions. So I would expect the user to ask any of these questions, right? Any of these questions here, and the bot to sort of respond to that. So let's see. Okay, so I think we already have what's yours. Okay, I'll say Liji, and hope we're happy with that. Let's see if it does a detect AQI. Was that done? Okay, so that was another parameter that I was looking for. So please don't mind the 70-20. But here's another question I want to ask. What is AQI? I mean, yeah, cool, right? And it also answers a lot of these questions. What is popular pollution, and so many other questions. In fact, what I wanted to also show is that you don't necessarily have to ask the question exactly the same way that it's configured. For example, I have a question here. What is the standard AQI for health life? I don't want to ask that question. No one would ask it exactly that way. So I just ask standard for AQI. And I'm expecting it to understand what I'm asking. And it says 0 to 50 is considered a good AQI, 24. So you get the idea. So there's a lot of possibilities with integration of the Composer as well. And you can similarly integrate that with language understanding services, etc. So before we wind up, perhaps one last slide, I would just say one of the questions that we get again asked is, great, lot of features, lot of components, lot of things that you can do in the Composer, in the tool, outside. What is our #1 priority when designing a bot? What is the one thing that we should always keep in mind? I would say it is the conversational user experience, because this is what is going to ultimately make or break our sessions, right? So it depends on the number of back and forth that you allow. The user is coming to your bot to get a very quick, easy, and accurate answer. Do not keep the user waiting. Do not make them ask you multiple questions. Give it to them fast, easy. Does the bot work on your mobile as good as your desktop? Is it easily discoverable? Can it guide the user around, where they want to go? And to build such a beautiful conversational experience, again, it's not about aesthetics. It really isn't about the interface per se. It is about the experience itself. But to build that experience, you need to be able to see it. You need to be able to visualize your components and your dialogues. And I think the bot Composer perfectly fits the bill as far as that is concerned. And so this is that, as I was, the missing leg in our bot development journey that is available to the community right now, and we can build great conversational experiences using the Composer tool. So that kind of brings us to the end of today's session. So a quick summary, what we covered was the history of conversational AI and a bit into Microsoft's offering in that space, the Composer, the tool. We took a look at demo, and I'm going to open it up for Q&A. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. But thank you so much for your time and for your patience. And please feel free to connect. And I'm also speaking at the Azure Community Conference, which is 10 days from today, where I will be, I think, connecting to language understanding services and a lot more, of sort of a build up on the sessions thus far on Composer. So feel free to join that session as well if you are interested, and do register. Thank you for your time, and I'll open it up for Q&A.